When I went to NYU film school, I learned that unlike real life, movies follow a formula. This is nowhere more apparent than in the romantic movie. Act 1, boy meets girl. Act 2, the first half, they fall in love, and the second half, a problem arises that threatens their relationship. Act 3, they overcome the obstacle and are united with a kiss. If I were to write my freshman year at NYU as a romantic screenplay, it would go something like this. Act 1, you had me at hello. Open on me, 18 years old, looking kind of like this, just, 20 pounds and 20 years ago. I am shy, introspective, but full of hope and excitement about my future. I'm sitting in a small basement office at my work-study job, campus media, AV support for NYU. I am staring longingly and drooling just a little over my boss, John. 22 years old, wearing jeans, a tight black t-shirt, and a leather jacket. He is staring off into space, wondering how the hell he ended up graduating from NYU Film School only to continue working the night shift at campus media. We had a lot of downtime at work, which we filled discussing movies and books and philosophy. I loved learning, especially from John, because he knew everything. He introduced me to musicians I'd never heard of, poets, and of course, movie directors. Now, occasionally John sounded depressed because he felt like he hadn't done anything with his life, and then I'd say, John, you can do anything, because I know I can do anything, and if I can do anything, you can. And in my little secret voice in the back of my head, I'd say, because you're a genius. I knew he liked me, even considered me a friend. What I didn't know was if he would ever love me. It was so painful to wait and watch him for 21 hours a week, wondering if he would ever ask me out. Act 2, you make me want to be a better man. As winter break came upon us, I was recovering from spending a month at home missing John. So we returned from winter break, and I realized it's the 90s. I don't need to wait for a man to ask me out. I can ask him out. Of course, it took me until almost spring break before I got up the courage. John was talking about how he wanted to see the new Harold Ramis movie, and I did too, and before I could chicken out, I blurted, "Do you want to go see Groundhog Day with me?" He didn't hesitate. He said yes. And just like that, we were going on a date, or, to a movie together. Now, I was so nervous and upset the rest of the week because it had taken me every last drop of courage just to ask him that one question. I never asked any follow-up questions, so we didn't have plans. So the whole rest of the time at work, I kept thinking, oh, of course he's forgotten. It didn't mean anything to him. The last day of work that week, as we were closing up, I was getting my coat on to go, and John stopped me and said, "Were you gonna leave before we could make plans?" My heart started pounding so loudly, I didn't hear a word he said. But the next night, we saw Groundhog Day together, and it was the most amazing movie, right? And afterwards, we went out for a drink, and we talked, and then we walked around the village, and we talked, and then we sat on the steps in Tompkins Square, and we talked. John could always talk. As we sat there discussing movies and life and possibilities, John said, "Don't take this the wrong way, but you make me want to get the fuck out of campus media." How could I take that the wrong way? He was telling me that I made him want more out of life, that I made him want to be more. If that isn't love, what is? Act 2, the second part. Nobody puts baby in the corner. A few weeks weeks later, John and I were sitting alone in the office waiting for the last of the night's deliveries to come back. And he was telling me how he really wanted to make a movie, but he didn't have a screenplay and he had no budget. I sat there listening quietly, but my brain was furiously going. You see, I was working on a script that took place in one room with 2 characters. You don't get a lower budget than that. I knew it would be perfect for him. But you see, though John had shared his brilliant senior thesis film with me, I had never shown John any of my work, and just the idea of it terrified me. So I needed to set the stage properly. I said, "John, could we have a talk?" And I saw him, like every man who has ever been asked that question, flinch. But he said, "Go ahead." And as I started, he grew more and more visibly uncomfortable, which made it harder for me to continue. I was thinking that maybe, I don't know, maybe, would you read my script? As soon as I said that last line, he completely relaxed. And I knew that he was relieved I hadn't told him I love him. And it killed me, especially when he laughed and said, "Sure, but you gotta work on your pitch because you nearly gave me a heart attack." I wanted to cry. Would I be that bad? Am I that awful? But I didn't want to lose him, whatever part of him I had, so I just laughed and said, "Hey, if I was gonna propose, I would have gotten down on one knee first." Act 3. When you know you want to spend the rest of your life with somebody, you want the rest of your life to start as soon as possible. As summer break was approaching, we had a month off before we were going to come back to work for the summer semester, John grew more despondent. I wanted to leave him with some encouragement. He hadn't read my script, and he had stopped talking about making a movie, so I think he was feeling a little hopeless. So I lent him Signal to Noise. It's a graphic novel by Neil Gaiman that had inspired me with the story of a screenwriter trying to complete his final screenplay before dying. I lent it to John, hoping it would inspire him over our break. We parted with a hug. When summer work started, I let a few days go by before I asked about the book. John said he hadn't had time to read it, but he would. And he said that every time I asked him over the next several weeks before he finally just gave up and gave me the book back, admitting he'd never get around to it. More than not reading my script, this hurt. It was a short story. It would have taken him an hour to read, but he thought so little of my opinion that he couldn't even do that one thing for me. I was ready to be done with him. I was ready to try to be done with him. But when I got back to my apartment that night, a postcard fell out of the book. John had written, "I've been meaning to write this a long time. I've been meaning to do a lot of things for a long time. Keep this card inside the book and imagine I had written something profound and meaningful, something you would have thought about and then disagreed with. Something like, it doesn't matter where you're going, so long as you know where you've been. Love, John." Love, John? Did that mean what I thought it meant? And he'd been meaning to write for a long time, been meaning to do a lot of things, like what? Like ask me out, kiss me, tell me he loved me? I was so confused. I had been 100% certain that he had no feelings of love for me, and then this. So, at work, I went back to waiting. I went back to waiting for him to say something or do something, and he didn't. A few days later, I brought up the postcard. I said, "Hey, John, got that postcard, thanks," thinking maybe it would prompt him. But he just said, "Oh yeah, thanks, no problem." Like it was of no significance at all. And I realized it probably wasn't. to him. I mean, I didn't know what he thought about me, if he thought about me at all. But I was so sick of trying to figure it out. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't wait for him and hope for him and wish that he secretly loved me but was too scared or shy or whatever to tell me. I needed to get away from him or I was going to go crazy. So when it came time to choose our hours for fall semester, I completely shifted my calendar around so that I would work with John as little as possible. Now, if I had written this screenplay, when John found out that he wasn't going to see me anymore, he would have realized that he loved me. He would have shown up to work early one day, surprising me at the end of the shift, swept me off my feet, kissed me, and carried me out of the campus media factory, putting his cap on my head. But one thing I learned at NYU is, unlike the movies, real life doesn't follow a formula. Thank you.